Let's go ahead and move on back to item 6.2 or 9:08 a.m. item, consideration of county investment policy. And we will wait for our Treasurer Tax Collector Patrick Sullivan to come up. And then Johanna, can you please put up the revised Lake County investment policy so we can go ahead and show on the Zoom room as well as on our monitors here the changes that we'll be discussing.
I'm not sure that I was sent the revised one.
It's on the attachments. I believe that either one of those attachments are exactly the same.
Okay, one moment.
Mr. Sullivan, do you want to get started while she brings that up?
So good morning, Board. Thank you for the opportunity to present this today and helping me get this done by the end of the year, which is critical. The investment policy is something that this revised policy is what we developed a few years ago in coordination with the Treasurer Tax Collector Committee. This was a major revision compared to the investment policy we had in prior years. What you have before you is essentially unaltered. There's a few minor changes suggested, but otherwise the majority of it would stay the same. There's nothing in here that would impact the way that our investments are currently structured or require any sort of change to the model we are using. I'll start first with a change that was recommended by Chandler Asset Management. This is on page 16 of this policy, and it's regarding reporting. State law was adjusted to allow 45 days for reporting. So when you look, I tried to incorporate the track changes, but it didn't pop on here. So when you look at page 16, under the reporting section, quarterly reports, you'll see in that first paragraph, within 45 days after the end of the quarter. It previously was 30 days. But the problem we run into is that there are different agencies that don't even report the interest we receive until a few weeks after the quarter closes. And so functionally, it was not possible for most offices to accurately report within 30 days. So that was part of the reason for the change to 45. So often, offices, including our own, were having to wait past the 30 days to provide an accurate report. This is basically codifying what was already happening throughout the state. So I don't believe that change should be controversial in any way, but I'm happy to take questions on it. The other change, though, is more significant, and this is what I really wanted to bring your board's attention. Our Treasury pool is composed of both mandatory and voluntary participants. So also on page 16, when you look at that bold language that's highlighted up here, okay, good. This one does show the track changes. So when you look at that language that's highlighted, the change we're going for is to prohibit voluntary participants from entering and exiting the pool. Our Treasury pool, the way that it differs from other pools is that as interest rates are rising right now, for instance, we are slowly building our rate of return up. We're buying new securities as old ones mature, and as we purchase those new ones, they're gaining that higher interest rate. And at some time in the next year or two, when rates level off, we're probably going to lock in at that rate so that when rates begin to drop, we don't crash. We're going to have kind of a slow ride down, and we'll gain the benefit of these higher rates for a few years to come. What happens, and what the concern that myself and many other county treasurers have had, is that smaller districts have been approached by other fund managers, people that are offering a higher rate of return, where they could exit our pool and immediately double or triple their return in the short term. And then once they catch up to our pool rate, they can rejoin our pool. But the problem with that is that the rest of the agencies in our pool end up essentially subsidizing that. When they exit the pool, we may have to sell maturities at a loss to pay them out. And then when they come back in, they're going to be credited with the full rate of return that all pool participants have. So it dilutes the earnings for everyone else. So the suggestion that I had is that we adjust it that typically, once you leave the pool, if you're an independent district, this does not impact the county or schools' mandatory participants. This would typically be smaller districts here. If they were to leave, they would typically not be allowed to return. If they were to return, we would have to examine the costs that the county incurred in allowing them to leave. Like if we did have to sell off, if we lost interest, and we would need to recoup that in order to bring them back into the pool. To be frank, I think for most districts, it's probably better for them to stay in the pool. Being part of the Treasury pool provides you with other services that are beneficial. If you go out on your own, you're accountable for all of those government code regulations that we have spent so much time trying to come into compliance with. That district would absorb that mantle by themselves, and the Treasury would no longer be there to assist them. So frankly, I don't think it's beneficial for any districts to do this. I understand it could look appetizing in the short term to capture that extra return, but in the long term, I don't believe it would be good for, in all likelihood, that district, or certainly not for the pool as a whole. So the sort of compromise I'm proposing here is that their return would have to be authorized by the treasurer. There would be notification of the Board of Supervisors, because often there are other contracts or agreements that the county has that could be implicated in this, and that would allow a review of the action. So again, that's the more substantive change, and I'm happy to answer any questions your board may have.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Any questions or comments? Supervisor Green?
Yeah, I get the goal of that second change, but it seems, come join our pool and you better stay in, because if you ever dive out, you don't get to come back in. So I get the goal of it, but I guess the mechanism stated here seems unnecessarily restrictive. Unless, of course, those coming in the pool are given, adequate notice that, you're coming in and you're married to this forever, and if you do leave, you won't be able to come back in. And I don't know that if I were somebody looking to take a voluntary action to come into this, that I would necessarily enjoy that condition, even if it's made for legitimate reasons. So. And the other thing, this says approval by the treasurer with notification of the board. If it's that big a sitch, then should it be with approval of the board? I don't know. So I don't know what the statutes are and all that. But anyway, it seems unnecessarily limiting to me, because it does, in a sense, potentially penalize those that voluntarily come in and want the flexibility to leave without penalty.
So I understand your position on that, and I wrestled with how to approach this. Many counties just have a complete bar on them returning. That's the typical path taken right now from what I've observed. I was trying to reach some sort of compromise. My concern is that, I think as you know, on the consent agenda, the board delegates its fiduciary duty to the treasurer. So that delegation is whole and complete. And so I have a fiduciary duty to the rest of the pool participants. So if I allow people to go in and out, every time people go in and out, the rest of us are essentially shelling out to cover that. So the problem for me is that at least my interpretation is that my duty lies with all the pool participants and to the pool as a whole. And so allowing people to go in and out, I'm concerned. I think it has a negative impact on them, and I'm not really comfortable with proceeding with that. The reason I did notification of the Board of Supervisors is, again, because that duty is delegated. So I had actually thought originally authorization by the board might have been acceptable, but that may be an improper delegation. Trying to walk a fine line on this. And like I said, typically most policies I'm familiar with that are making these changes are doing a bar. I'm trying to find some sort of middle ground to allow someone back if they pay those costs.
No further questions. So I appreciated the conversation you and I had about this. There is one thing, especially based on what Supervisor Green just said. The statement, any such authorization may consider cost recovery for expenses or losses incurred by the process. If somebody leaves, that's not what that statement's for. It's if they come back only, correct?
That's correct.
Because I thought I heard Supervisor Green saying that there might be a penalty for just leaving. At that point, you have the right to leave. You're voluntary. But if you start stepping in and out just to see where you could take full advantage, at that point, you're taking advantage of us. I do believe that mistakes can be made. People can see an offer on the table that seems much better than what it might actually be, and that they do take that bait and they end up leaving. I don't see a timeline. This is very much a forever clause. Would it be appropriate to set a timeline of if you come back prior than 2 years, prior than 1 year, just because this seems very much like it's closed and final 20 years down the road, sorry, you left, you can't come back. At that point, I would love to get more of our community agencies to buy into what we're doing. I will say I'm not that concerned. If they didn't jump ship when we weren't doing good investment, when right now we're doing absolutely amazing investment, I just don't see that as being a issue for us. But I understand the reason to want to protect ourselves from having to shell out more for one agency because they're making actions that affect us, and every single one of us left in that investment pool take that loss for them. That's not very fair. So I understand the reason for bringing it. So I made a lot of statements. I apologize.
No, those are all good points, and I think maybe something that could further alleviate the concerns of both Supervisor Spatier and Supervisor Green is we could put a 3-year cap in here, because 3 years is about the edge of what we normally go to in our investments. 5 years is, really the legal edge of what we do, but we're operating under 3, and I don't anticipate exceeding 3 year as a mark. So if we were to put in, such as at the end of that sentence, any such authorization may consider cost recovery for expenses or losses incurred by the process upon, if returned, if
Prior to 3
returned to
years?
the pool prior to 3 years, would that work as more of a middle ground?
It would if Treasurer Tax Collector has a specific language, and then the policy can be approved as amended.
Okay. So if,
Supervisor Crandall?
Yes, I wanted to ask, when you say agency, you're talking about other school districts, fire districts and whatnot, which are also elected boards that pretty much change every 2 years. And so I think 2 years would be more ideal. We all know that when you have a different elected body, sometimes the direction changes. So that's why I recommend 2 years. And I don't want to hold a new body, not hostage. That's a harsh word, but you know what I mean. I just want to give them the opportunity to start fresh if they want to make that decision, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I'm comfortable with 2. Our interval right now or duration is less than 2.
2.6.
So I think, I don't see any issue with that if we were to adjust it to 2. So then the language I would propose is that at the end of that sentence, after process, if return to the pool is sought within 2 years, would that resolve this? Okay.
I'd be good with that. At least it doesn't sound like a forever clause. Okay.
Yeah.
Any further comments?
And just, I'm going to assume there's going to be notification for a new person, a new agency doing a voluntary contribution, that limitation will be disclosed at that time.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any new agencies in the county, but like a new JPA, if something were created here, if they wanted to join the pool, we would share the policy with them and we would have a meeting with them to explain, what the services are that we offer, what the benefits and disadvantages are of being in the pool. And, we try to have full transparency beforehand.
So it's already built into your process. Not that people are climbing to get in, but
I don't believe we have onboarded a new agency in a decade or more at this point. But yeah, if one comes up, we'll definitely address it.
all right, thank you. And the existing agencies, then, they'll be notified of this change.
Yes, we can do a notification to all agencies in the pool once this policy is approved.
All right, thank you.
Just to put it out there, another way to make sure that agencies are in the know of why things are happening. I know we haven't reinvigorated the Investment Policy Advisory Council or Advisory Board or whatever the name of the committee would be called. That might be another way to get people to better understand and have buy-in to some of the changes. Just putting it out there.
Yeah, I think we can definitely look at having a committee again in the future. The Treasury Oversight Committee is no longer the legal requirement. So a lot of counties have, just as we had the Treasurer Tax Collector Committee, the county can create any kind of committee that it wants to help offer input or advice on that. The other thing I have encouraged in the past districts that had questions to come to meetings when we do the investment overview and presentation, and that's That's probably a really good opportunity as well, just because our investment advisor is here. So I would, again, encourage any agency that's interested to come to those quarterly updates.
Okay. Thank you very much. Nothing further. We'll want to open it up for the public. Any public comment on this item? I see nobody getting up in the board chambers. Johanna?
No hands in Zoom.
All right, bringing it back to the board.
Move to approve the recommended investment policy as amended.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Green, second by Supervisor Crandall. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion passes. All right, thank you very much.